Okay, so today's session, we're going to be covering managing your website files. This was actually a question that came up. I believe it was during our November sessions. One of the participants asked about tips and tricks for managing website files behind the scenes. And so that's what we're going to cover today. Those of you that have been to these sessions before, you'll recognize these things to take note of. During the presentation, I ask that you please keep your microphones muted. Go ahead and check and make sure they're muted right now. Next, if you have any questions, please submit your questions or comments through the chat during the presentation. You can also choose to hold on to your questions until the end because we will be having a question and answers session. So in today's session, we're going to review the benefits of setting a site structure and naming conventions. We're going to see how you can access and manage your site files. We're going to review dealing with large files. Video and audio files tend to take up a lot of space. So we're going to look at some alternative solutions for those. We're going to look at using web-ready formats such as PDF instead of your editable documents such as Excel and Microsoft Word files. And finally, as I just mentioned, we're going to be taking your question and answers at the end. Oh, and before we do the question and answers, we're going to have a live demo. So you're going to get to see me go into the EVO CMS and also use another application called cPanel for working with and managing our site files. All right, as I said, we're going to start off by talking about the benefits of setting a file structure. So having a good file structure for your website's files helps to save time with finding the items needed, encourages thinking about where to place files rather than using the folder structure as a digital dumping ground. And all too often, this happens on many websites for parishes, organizations, metropolises. It's easy to do just a quick file dump, but creating this folder structure helps with making sure that you're putting things in the right spot. Because one of the benefits of the EVO CMS and even other CMSs like WordPress, for example, they allow for multiple users to share the burden of editing the website. So if you've got a good folder structure in place, you and everybody else on your internet ministry team, whether it's other members from your parish priest, all of you can easily find the PDFs, the image files, and so forth that are necessary for keeping your website rather up to date. And setting up this file structure, this folder structure, contributes to good website maintenance habits that we just discussed. So where to begin? As I was doing research the other day into this topic, I found this great little comic that you see up on your screen here, and I think it helps to illustrate very well some of the issues that people run into when dealing with setting up folder structures and file structures and so forth. So where to begin? Use intuitive labeling. Avoid labeling folders as other or random. Avoid using unidentifiable numbering, which all too often when we're doing file dumps, especially with images, if you're taking pictures on a camera, a nice camera, or even from your iPhone, your mobile device, you get a lot of this random numbering, which will happen with the folder structures on the camera or in naming the files on your system. And there isn't any time taken really to name them appropriately. So avoid using those unidentifiable numbers, or even using personal names like Paul's folder, which we've seen all too often as we've helped parishes out with their website maintenance. Be consistent with your folder structure. Ensure that this structure is set throughout your entire website manager, your entire file manager, and not just in one small area. Set the level of granularity. How far down do you want to click to find your files? And make sure to future-proof your file structure, your folder structure. Look to the future. Organizing by year might be great, but maybe organizing by topic might be better for you. And that leads to making sure that you have a good planning process in place. So what you want to do is, we suggest evaluating what you already have available to you on your website. Evaluate your site folders, how everything is set up, how deep that folder structure goes. Evaluate the files that you have, how they're named, where they're set up, where they're placed. And you've also got to pay attention to really well on where your links on your website are pointing to, because images are pointing to your folder structure and these files that you have within those folders. You've got bulletins, sermons, parish council reports, posters, announcements about events. Whatever you're allowing your site visitors to download, it's all pointing to this folder structure. So you want to be very aware of that. And we're going to later on explore a little bit related to checking out those links. Consider setting expiration dates. So if you've got a plan in place for managing and editing your folder structure and your files, as you're doing your evaluation, you may find that you've got files going back 10 years, 12 years. Gosh, I can think of a few sites off the top of my head that have files going back 20 years. So do you need to keep all of those in your file structure, in your folder structure? Consider maybe setting expiration dates. So maybe you hold on to things on the website, in your website's file manager for 10 years. After 10 years, you make sure that they're backed up on a local drive if you want to hold on to them. And you want to check and see if your site visitors are accessing any of this information. A lot of parish websites and organization websites are set up with Google Analytics or some other type of analytics software or application rather to keep track of where your site visitors are going and what they're doing on your website. So paying attention to those analytics can help with determining just what you keep and what you pitch. Think about the files you're working with. Typically, we see our websites, our hosted websites, working with image files like JPEGs, GIFs, and PNGs. We see them also using document files like PDFs, Microsoft Word docs, and Excel documents as well. And even to some extent, some will even upload PowerPoint files. Some will even upload audio files and video files. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those in just a little bit. Think about, as you're planning all this stuff out, think about how you want to search for your files. Do you want to, as I was mentioning just a little while ago, as far as granularity, do you want to dig far into your folder structure to find things? Do you want to make sure that it's easy to find certain files, your bulletin files, images related to your homepage carousel, images related to your information cards? If you want to be able to find those properly, then we've got to start coming up with a plan on how to set up that folder structure and name everything properly as well. And like with so many things that we do in life, we've got lists for our Christmas dinners and how we want to set things up, and we've got lists for things we want to do on the weekend and how we want to plan things out when we're maybe restructuring our closets or our homes. In the same way, map things out on paper first when you're planning to reorganize your parish website, and set a time frame for getting things done. If this is something you want to do, set a date for when you want to have it completed and chip away at it little by little over a period of time. So let's take a look at a bad example of folder structure here. I'm going to just pause for about 5 seconds or so, and I want you to take a look at this list here that I have on the left-hand side of the page. Okay. Let's take a look at now what's wrong with this file structure, this folder structure. So I mentioned before about using file names that are intuitive, using file names and folder names that are easy to understand. So in this, and I've highlighted here, you'll see that we've got a few folders that are numbered. It looks like maybe they could have been numbered by a camera or some other type of filing system, and they might have just been dragged right into the website. That doesn't really tell us much about what's in those folders. We also see that there's a folder marked Office Don't Use. Well, what does that mean? And there's a folder named Vaso. Who's Vaso? And what does she have in her folder? And how does that help me to find what I need quickly and easily when I'm setting up a page? Mobile pics. Okay, so it looks like somebody took a bunch of images from their mobile device and uploaded them to the website. But what types of images are in there? And we've got a miscellaneous folder as well. Well, what does that have? And how does it help me with my website maintenance? You'll also notice that we've got some duplicate folders here as well. So we've got 2 events folders. Actually, one is news and events, and another one is events within the community folder. And we also have 2 festival folders. Well, why is that? And how does that, again, how does that help out with my overall website maintenance? So this is something else that we want to avoid. We want to avoid duplicating work, or in this case, duplicating folders, and causing further confusion on how to find the right things, and causing confusion for any other people that are helping us with our website maintenance. So let's take a look now at a good example of a folder structure here. So now within images, we have our community folder, and within that, we've got our photos for clergy, our parish history. Maybe there's photos related to the interior of the parish, the iconostasi, other icons and liturgical vessels within the church. We've got photos of our patron saint. We've got folders set up for our homepage carousel, our information cards. We've got a folder set up for our ministries. So it's easy to find maybe Goya is in there, and Philoptochos, and the outreach ministries, and so forth. Our news and events folder, instead of having 2 events folders, now we have 1. And so now within news and events, we can organize by feast days, festival. You can have in there articles. If you're putting regular articles on your parish website, you can have in there images related to those articles, and ways to give, images related to online donations, and any other type of promotional images that you might have related to stewardship or volunteering or outreach within your community. So it looks like here, this file structure was set up according to the types of content that are on a parish website. This actually might even mimic, in some ways, the main navigation on a parish website. The parish website navigation might have a community section, ministry section, news and events section, and ways to give section. And then we know that directly on the homepage carousel and the information cards are front and center on that homepage. So it's easy to understand what those two folders are for as well. Let's take a look here now at another example. Again, this is within an images folder. We have a folder for banners and buttons. We've got a folder for homepage carousel, and you can see within that homepage carousel folder structure, we've got all our homepage carousel images organized by year. Below that, we've got our information cards. We have images related to iconography. So we've got that sectioned out by church interior and patron saint. And then we've got photos related to our clergy. That could be clergy past and present. Our office staff, a lot of parishes like to include images of the office administrators, parish council president, maybe even the entire parish council. We've got our ministries folder, which is then now sectioned out, as you can see, based upon the different ministries. So we've got youth ministry and religious education within youth ministry. Within there, you could also have, again, Philoptochos, outreach, and so forth. This gives you an idea of a little bit more, this is a little bit more granular. This causes you to dig a little bit more for your files, but perhaps this is a file structure that you feel that you and your other internet ministry team members can use and find to be easy to use for organizing your site files. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about folder structure. Let's take a look here about at naming conventions. Naming conventions, like setting up a good folder structure, helps you to stay organized. And it makes it easier to find and identify your files. So here's some best practices for your naming conventions. Consider using metadata for your naming. So metadata, for those of you that may be familiar with the term, but maybe not be familiar with just exactly what it means. Metadata, in a sense, is data that provides information about your files. So this would include maybe including a date, a source, or a type within your file name. So like we did with the folder structure, let's take a look at some bad examples of naming conventions. And I'll pause here just for about 5 seconds or so to have you look at these, and then we'll review. Okay, let's review these together here. Getting a closer look at what we've got here. Again, like with our folder structure, we've got duplicates. Any duplicate files that you're going to have in your folders are going to take up extra space. And then all of these, I highlighted everything because all of them are not really that intuitive. Like dinner dance flyer 06 copy. Well, what dinner dance? What year was it? Is 06 a month or is 06 a year? Meeting notes, January 17th. Wonderful. January 17th, when? And Panayotti old. Well, why is Panayotti putting his files in the folder structure for our website and not naming it appropriately? We've got the duplicate files that we pointed out there. The con 34598, great for a camera image name, but it doesn't help me out to finding out just what that image is all about and how I can use it on the site. Banner.gif, well, what banner is it? And where does it appear on the site? And Sunday sermon 48. Well, that's great. I know it's a Sunday sermon, but when was it given? How can I, if I need to find it later on, well, where do I need to find, where can I find that file? And where can it best be used on my site? So let's take a look now at naming conventions that are good to use. So we talked about that metadata before, being able to throw in a little bit of extra information into our file names so it's easy to understand what they are. So you'll see here in the first two, I have the date, the month, and the day at the start of the file name. So we've got 2023, 01 for January, and 11 for the 11th day of the month. And then we know after that, that it's a parish council expense report. Wonderful. It's easy for me now to understand that this is the expense report from January 11th, 2023. And I know where I can now file that in my folder structure. Same with the sermon that Father Andreas Pappas delivered on January 11th, 2023. So I know that it was Father Andreas Pappas and not one of the previous priests that delivered that sermon. So now I can also, or I said sermon, rather it's labeled as Bible study. Now I know where to file it accordingly. And I also know here too, that this Bible study covered 1 Corinthians chapters 1 to 4. I see that I've got 2 images, actually 4 images below those 2 PDFs. And I see that the first 2 images listed there are related to my carousel. Carousel 2023, one is for the Apocreatico dinner. So I'm guessing that this parish might have had a nice photo up there on their homepage for their Apocreatico dinner. So that's clearly labeled there. And then we've got one for Epiphany services. And that perhaps was an image used in the carousel to highlight the upcoming Epiphany services, which was probably posted sometime after Christmas. And then information cards. We've got those labeled accordingly as well. Light a candle, charitable giving. I know exactly what they are used for in my information cards. That way, if I need to use them again, I know exactly what to grab and I can quickly get it done. Now, I want to point out here, before I move to the next slide, that, and can I go back? There we go. I'm going to go back one slide here. You'll notice here that we have some Microsoft Word docs. We've got PDFs and we've got JPEGs and GIFs here in this list here. In this example of good naming conventions, you'll notice that it's been restricted to PDFs and JPEGs. Now, I didn't take the GIFs out for any particular reason, but I did remove the Microsoft Word files because that leads to our next topic here, which is knowing your file types. I mentioned earlier about as we're going to be looking at file types, we're going to be talking about some large files like audio and video files. And we're going to look at some of these document files as well. When it comes to storing large files, video and audio take up a tremendous amount of file space on the server. And there are still parishes that are hosting on their website audio files, maybe perhaps they're recorded sermons or recorded Bible studies or announcements that were made on the radio about upcoming events on their local radio stations. Or they're hosting videos. Perhaps they're hosting recorded Bible studies, recorded commercials that they made for perhaps a church festival. recorded church services or sacraments. Again, audio and video files take up a tremendous amount of space on the file server. Having large files like those and embedding those audio files and video files on your parish website can sour user experience with long downloads. A video file isn't going to be just 1 or 2 megabytes. You're probably going to be looking at 100 or 200 or 300 or more megabytes, which when somebody is downloading that, it's going to take quite a while, especially for your users that are accessing your website via a mobile device. So instead of hosting those files directly on your website, we suggest using services like YouTube, Vimeo, or SoundCloud to store and share your files. Let them take on the burden of hosting those large files. All you need to do once you set up your account with those services, all you need to do is embed a link on your parish website to those files, and provides a much better user experience for your site visitors, because it's a quick play, it's quick access, because it's hosted on those services that have the ability to handle the bandwidth of playing such large files. And I pointed out the doc, the Microsoft Word doc and the Excel files earlier. Instead of using these editable file types, or rather providing these editable file types through your website for your site visitors to download, consider converting those editable file types to PDFs. A PDF ensures that the formatting and the layout are preserved in those files. So if you've created a poster for your dinner dance in Microsoft Word, the formatting of that poster is going to be retained in that PDF. Whereas if I open up that poster in my version of Microsoft Word and I don't have the appropriate fonts installed, it's going to look different to me. And PDFs can significantly reduce file size. So that Microsoft Word doc, that Excel file that has a bunch of different tabs in it, that PowerPoint file that has 20, 30, 40 slides in it, can all be converted to PDFs and be much easier for your users to download and access and read through. And we'll be talking, I believe it's our next, I think it's our next webinar. We're going to be talking a little bit more about optimizing files for your website, and that includes how to optimize your files as PDFs. Give you something to come back for. Now, dealing with your files, renaming, reorganizing, and deleting if necessary. Moving and renaming files will affect how they're linked on your site. So that's something that you want to always keep in the forefront of your mind, that whatever you're going to do in your file structure, in your folder structure, in your website manager is going to affect how your site visitors are downloading those files from your website. Renaming or moving will require that you update the links to those files on your site to ensure that they are pointing to the proper files or images. And remember that deleting files will permanently remove those files from your site. Now, your websites, because they're hosted with us, they are backed up regularly on our servers, automatically on our servers. Even though we have those backups, we still advise that you exercise caution when choosing to delete your files. And any deletion will require that you remove the link or reference to those deleted files from your website. And again, we'll take a look at that in the live demo coming up shortly. Getting the job done. So how do you edit those files? How do you rename? How do you reorganize? How do you delete them properly? Well, you got two options here. The first is going through the EVO CMS file manager. With that file manager, though, you are limited to viewing, renaming, adding folders, and deleting folders. This works well if you're happy with your folder structure, but maybe just need to clean up the naming or removing old or unnecessary files. The second way to get this done is using the cPanel file manager. Now, all of our hosted sites, when we moved your site, it was just over a year ago, over to our new server, we provided you with access to your cPanel. We would have given you a link, a username, and a password along with that. If for some reason you've misplaced it, we are more than happy to help you with getting access to that information again. The cPanel file manager, which we're going to explore as well, is used to manage the space and settings for your web hosting package. And within the cPanel file manager, you've got a wide range of access here for your files. So this will allow you to view, move, rename, add, and delete your folders and your files. Okay. Now that we've done with the presentation, let's move into the live demo. I'm going to just stop sharing my screen for a moment. And I'm going to pull up the EVO. Here we go. All right, I'm going to pull up the EVO manager first. Oh, actually, let me just share it a different way. Hold on. Okay. Okay, I've already logged into the EVO manager. And I'm going to, in order to get to the file manager, I'm going to go to Elements. And I'm going to go to Manage Files. I've said in other presentations, and I'll repeat it myself again here. Your EVO website manager is going to look different from mine. So my folder structure here in my document tree on the left-hand side of the page is going to look a lot different from yours. And my file manager here in the center of the screen is going to look a lot different from yours. But I'm going to talk about a couple of the folders here that are common within our file structures. Okay. So in order to access my files and my images folders, I'm going to go into Assets. And then you'll see here I've got Files, and I've got Images just below that. To get into those, I simply need to tap on the file name or click on the file name, or on the folder name in this case. Now, for the purposes of this demo, so you'll be using, just as I showed here, files and images within the Assets folder. For this demo, though, I've set up a couple other different folders. Again, files and images. So within here, I've got a nice little file structure set up. Okay, so here I've got two different files here. I've got a dinner dance flyer, one as a Microsoft Word document, another as a PDF. The PDF is the one that I'm going to want to retain. Now, if I was coming in here and I didn't have the PDF already uploaded, I could do that. by simply clicking on Choose File, and then finding my file here in my computer, and then selecting that file and then clicking Open here in the pop-up. So here with my files, I'm only limited, as you can see here on the right-hand side, I'm only limited to downloading the file and deleting it. So I can't rename these files here. I can rename my folder up in the manager. You'll see here Sunday Bulletin. I've got the ability to rename here with this little cursor icon. And I also have the ability to delete. So I can rename my folder, but I can't rename my file. That's going to be different when we go into cPanel. But what I can do is, because I don't want this Microsoft Word doc of my flyer anymore, I can simply come over and click the trash can to delete it. And then I've got my little confirmation up here at the top that it was successful in deleting my file. Now as I go into my folders here, I'm going back in the file structure, in the folder structure, by using these breadcrumbs up here at the top of the file manager. So I can go into Files, I can go into News and Events, I can go into Sunday Bulletin, and then I can go backwards by clicking on these breadcrumbs. I can go back to News and Events, and go back to Files, and I'm going to jump into my Images folder. So we saw earlier that a lot of these random numbers or random file names, folder names rather, don't work well for our folder structure. So because I have the ability to rename a folder, I'm going to go ahead and rename these two here at the top as an example. So I'm going to click on this little cursor icon here on the right-hand side. In the pop-up here provided, I can simply type in my new file name. So in this case, I want to call it Homepage Carousel. Great. And you'll see here, I no longer have that numbered folder. It's now been renamed to the Homepage Carousel. And this other numbered folder, I'm going to name this one Information Cards. Great. So those two folders have now been renamed. Okay, I'm going to shift now for a moment to introduce you to the cPanel environment. Now, I mentioned before that when your Paris website was moved to our new servers, we sent all of you information on how to access your cPanel environment. That would have included a link, a username, and a password, as I had mentioned. I'm here right now on our support website because we do have an article to help you out with getting started with cPanel. And within there, it does give you the link to the cPanel page, which I've already logged into. But this is the link that you would follow. And on that login page, you would then add in your login credentials and then come to the dashboard. Now, this is what your dashboard might look like in cPanel. There's a lot here to digest, and in a future webinar, we're going to go more in depth into cPanel and guide you through it. So, but for the purposes of this demo, we're just going to focus on the file manager, which I've already logged into, or which I've already clicked on. So when I come into the file manager, I've got my folder structure here on the left-hand side of the page. Again, your folder structure in cPanel is going to look a lot different from mine. So what I'll do is, in my folder structure, I'm going to find my website's name. In this case, it's my template website. And I've gone into my assets folder. This is the same structure that we just saw in the EVO CMS. So I'm going into assets, and you'll see here, just like in the EVO CMS, I've got my files folder and I've got my images folder. So here within files, I've got a folder for my parish bulletin. And I've got a folder here set for 2023. And look at that. I've got two different file types again. I've got a Microsoft Word document and I've got a PDF. Well, that's a problem because, as I mentioned earlier, it's much better for you to use PDFs than to use the editable documents when you're sharing documents like this through your website. So through cPanel, I can select this Microsoft Word doc that I don't want in there anymore. So simply by clicking on it once, oops, I'll highlight it. And you'll notice here up at the top, I've got a nice row of buttons. And here I've got an option to delete. So I'm going to click delete. It's going to give me a confirmation of whether I want to delete the file or not. I have an option to skip the trash and permanently delete the file. If you would like to go back to the trash can and retrieve files that you deleted, then you want to make sure that you leave this unchecked. So go ahead and I'll go ahead and confirm, and my file's gone. Now, if I want to rename this PDF so that it has a better naming convention applied to it, again, up here in my list of buttons, I have an option to rename. I'm going to click that, and the pop-up provided, I can then apply my naming convention. So perhaps I want to call it 2023 0101. Oops, not button, but bulletin. And if I want to be a little bit more descriptive, I could say Sunday bulletin to differentiate it from my monthly bulletin. So I've got the date, 2023, 01 for January, 01 for January 1st. And then I've got what's included in the file. And in this case, it's my Sunday bulletin. I'm going to click rename file, and it's been renamed for me here. Let's take a look at that again, but let's go to our images. So I'm in my images folder here. I renamed those two folders to homepage carousel and information cards. You see them here. Let's take a look in there though. Oh, and you know what I noticed? I made an error. I actually wanted to name this one information cards. So let's name that one homepage temporarily. This one I wanted to name information cards. And all I'm doing is, so before I did rename up here in the menu. What I've been doing here is I can come here and I can just click on the file name and it'll allow me to edit it right in place. Okay, there we go. So now I have my folders named the way that I want them. So if I come into information cards here, I've got a banner. I've got, and I've got my duplicate images here. So you'll notice here that these two images, but actually they're both the same file size, but notice they're 445 kilobytes each. So gosh, that's combined, that's almost 900 kilobytes. That's a lot of space. So because it's a duplicate, I'm going to delete it. I can either right click here and choose delete from a pop-up menu. I could, as I did before, I can come to the menu up here at the top and click delete. It's entirely up to you, whatever's easier for you. Delete. I'm going to leave this checkbox unchecked because I don't want to permanently delete it, just in case I need to retrieve it later on. I'm going to click confirm. My file has been removed. And now I can come and I can rename this file. And I want to rename that to, this is my information card, so I want to call it information cards, light, a candle, and then I believe it's got JPEG at the end. Great. Now, I didn't see that come up right away, so I've got a reload button up here. I'm going to tap reload and see if it puts the proper name up there. Nope, so it didn't take. I'm gonna highlight the file again. I'm going to choose rename. I'm going to do it from the pop-up window instead of doing it right in place. Let's see if that works better. Light, oops, a candle. Okay. There we go. Great. Information cards, light a candle.jpg is now in my folder. I've got this banner image. And I should probably rename that one as well because it doesn't really tell me all that much about what's in there. So let's see. I'm going to rename that one. Information cards, because we're in the information cards folder. And let's call this one, I believe this one was ways to give. Great. So I've got my light a candle and my ways to give images properly named in my information cards folder. I've got this mobile pictures folder here. Well, that doesn't help me all that much. I've got my miscellaneous folder here in my news and events folder, and that doesn't really help all that much either. So let's see. Let's go ahead. Did I put anything in mobile pics? I did not. Well, let's say we don't need mobile pics anymore here in our file structure. So I'm going to delete that folder. And again, I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to come up to my menu here at the top. I'm going to click delete. I'm going to leave that checkbox unchecked just in case I need to retrieve it again. I'm going to click confirm. Within news and events, I'm going to double click here on the folder. I've got one for festival. I've got one titled miscellaneous, but I don't want it to be miscellaneous. Perhaps we've got information in there for let's say feast days. Oops. Let's rename. Let's rename that to feast days. Great. Now, if I need to move things around, let's say that I want to move news and events within my community folder. Well, I can highlight that, and then I can click, and you notice my cursor is changed to kind of like this little cross, and I can drag, and I can drop news and events into my community folder. You'll notice here that on the left-hand side of the page, community now has a little plus sign applied to it. And if I click on that, there's my news and events folder right in there. Now, if I move news and events in error, no problem. I can very easily drag that back into the images folder. And I can do that just like this. Oops. I can simply click here on the left-hand side. I can drag up here. And I can drag it right back into the images folder. And if I click reload, there it is back there in news and events. So it's easy to move, rename, delete, reorganize through the cPanel. And as you can see, it's nice to be able to do that in the EVO CMS, but cPanel just provides a much more, a wider range level of functionality than the EVO CMS does. I just want to caution you that, again, there's a lot here that's available using cPanel. So I would caution you to use cPanel carefully. Watch what you're dragging, watch what you're renaming, watch what you're deleting. And if you ever have any questions, this is why we're here. And we're happy to answer your questions related to cPanel, folder structure, naming conventions, or what have you. I pointed out that as we're doing all this restructuring and renaming and so forth, you got to pay attention to your website as well. As you go through your site, as you're evaluating your site's content, whether it's on the live site, on the front end, to see just what you have linked, where it's linked. A good way to do that is you can hover over the link. So if you've got a bulletin, you can hover over the link and you can see it listed at the bottom of the page. You can right click on it, and you can open the link in a new tab, and it will display the full URL up here, so you can see the folder where those PDFs are stored. With your images, I mean, simply coming into your site before you do any work to restructure, simply coming into your site, editing a resource, clicking on that image to highlight it, and then clicking the Insert Edit Image button in your WYSIWYG editor will show you exactly where that image is located. And you want to take note of that as you move forward with your site, your folder restructuring, and your renaming. Right. I just have a couple slides here left for us to review. And then we'll move on to your question and answers. So takeaways from our presentation. Again, you want to make sure that you have a plan in place for managing your files. You want to set a folder structure to encourage organization rather than using folders as dumping grounds. Use that intuitive labeling that we talked about. Be consistent with your labeling. Set the level of granularity. Have an idea of just how far you want to drill down in order to save your files or to retrieve your files. And make sure to make it future-proof. So maybe organizing things by date isn't the right way. Maybe you need to organize it by type. Or maybe for you and your parish, organizing by type is the better way to do it, and maybe not by date. Or maybe it's a combination of the two. But make sure you come up with an idea of just how you want to take care of things. Set your naming conventions to easily organize and identify your files. And consider using metadata in your naming: date, source, content type, just to name a few of them. And know your file types. Those editable documents that you're sharing through your website, consider taking those MS Word files, consider taking those Excel files and PowerPoint files and converting them into PDFs so that they retain their look and that they're easy to download.